Mr. Whispers on Reddit asked me how I made this. So in the spirit of John Dixon, who's JD3 Lasers on Instagram and YouTube, you gotta check out his work. It's fucking incredible. He's been extremely generous and just no gatekeeping, showing me how he's done stuff for timelines. I want to repay it forward to you by kind of deep diving into how I made this one particular effect. Credit other people that have been really helpful to me along the way. So the first thing that you might notice is happening here is that usually for most of the show, the effects are going to be symmetric or mirrored. And in this show file, we do that by mirroring the right-hand side zones or the left-hand side zones, depending on where. The way that the trick I learned from Patrick Willett, High Beam Lasers, guy who invited me to program for this show, is to have a notes line on your timelines that calls out for other people or for yourself in a year from now when you don't remember anything weird that you're doing. And so it says, hey, there's an unmirror happening via a PangoScript on a bus track. So I go down to the master bus track and I find it. Yep, all caps, so I can remember that something weird is happening here. And we can see that when we cross over this starting boundary, it's going to take those all the high power projectors, and using a particular channel, it's going to unmirror those so that they're all in one line. This particular zone scheme comes from another incredibly talented laserist that you got to check out. Follow him on Instagram. His name is Logan Azanius, and his Hypnotica beams. And so I believe that he suggested the scheme for this one, and that happens where we're using channel 101 to asymmetrically, or like instead of making symmetry, when we go to over the halfway mark on channel 101, the high power lasers are going to flip to be all one direction as opposed to their default when it's a low value, which is that they are mirrored. So that's the first thing to notice is happening for this particular cue, is that they're happening all in one line. So you got to flip that somewhere. Honestly, this kind of fucked up during the show, so I think there's alternate methods that aren't as dependent about crossing over a particular boundary to create your channel stuff. I might use those in the future, because like if the DJ jumps around and doesn't cross this boundary with their time code, or does cross this boundary, you can get like very unpredictable results. I just like this method because it keeps fewer tracks in your timeline, and it's kind of easier for me to think about. But anyway, so with that out of the way, credit to Patrick for always using a notes line for weird stuff. I'm going to go into what this effect actually is that we're looking at. The first thing to take a look at is that the music has this thing called a tremolo rolando. It's a slowing, strumming noise, and so I just like traced that with a bunch of distinct events, but they're all doing the same thing. They're really just a desaturation flash. It's going to be white with zero saturation at the beginning, and as you go through it, it's going to allow in the color that's underneath, that's under that cue, this is a particular pink and white cue. So we can just turn that off for the moment as we disable layers to see how it's built from the start. And now we'll go into that cue itself to see what's happening. And to decode it, I like to just kind of disable everything that matters and go through it one by one. So at its root level in this Synth Image stack, we have a writeout or path following. I like this because it kind of lets you do shapes that decay over space. And so this is a single dot image. I think it's like a 20-point white image that you can't even see here. And then the path is simply like a top to bottom vector that I drew in the frame editor. I hate how this opens the simple editor. I usually go and make these paths over in the advanced frame editor, save them as a path file, and then just open them here to get more control over your paths. But that's like a simple downward decaying path. I did, this duration field here of 0.47 seconds is what a quarter note is at the default tempo for this song, which was 128 BPM. They don't let you define a duration in beat terms here, so I did it in a calculator to figure out that it was 0.47 seconds to make an exact 1 quarter note beat. So on top of that, we will, I think I've probably flipped it yeah, I've flipped it so that it goes up, and then I have a white head and a pink to red tail happening. Next layer, I don't even know if this is really necessary for a writeout path following. I forget how it does its blanking on the black parts of this cue, but you can, whenever you do have like a lot of black regions, you should probably add a delete dark lines, especially if you have a high point count, so that you don't slow down your projectors. And then what is happening from the start here is that first we make a star with 5 clone rounds. Then for anything that I have where there's a geometry to it, like a shape, like this is going to be 5-pointed star, pentagon, and then this is a trick that I think I came up with, but I've seen other people do too. For anything geometric, I'm going to squish the X by a particular amount that I want to set later when I get to that show site and know how squished my zone is, Y versus X. So it's using a channel here, like channel 11, which I call aspect ratio correction, to set how badly we squish this thing. And I'm going to get to a show site. We're going to zone everything. And then let's say that we find out that we can only do Y at like 5% of the X. So maybe the X width is 100, Y height is 5. That's a 1:20 ratio, or 0.05. I would come in here and set this channel 11 later, which will change how squished in X this geometric shape is going to be, so that it still looks like a 5-pointed star when it comes out that particular zone for that show, before I start moving it around. And then I only do this on cues where I have a shape, like a circle or a square or a triangle, that I'm trying to keep that shape. And then last, the core of the whole thing, this is all the micro. And I learned that in this show, I really learned that the more projectors you have, the more I'm likely to overfocus on the micro details instead of the big picture. What people are actually perceiving is really just the zone shift and the motion. And that is happening with this. So here's the motion. And I'm sure you could do this with some keyframes too over the period, this 10 beats. I did it with a right-click custom waveform on this key so that I could draw what I wanted that motion to look like over time. I wanted something kind of smooth but chaotic, something that you wouldn't see a lot if you were just doing the normal linears and curves and ping pongs and all that. And then the way that it's delayed across the projectors, there's a couple places you can do zone delays. I like to do it generally at this level, so it's going to affect all 3 of these, or everything that's in this layer of the stack. And I'm doing it with a quarter or a 16th note, so negative 0.25 of a BPM shift across all the zones. So 2 things to note here is like why 10 beats. That's important, and why. And the reason is because overall I had already gone into this knowing that I had about 8 beats to fill. I needed to make an event that was going to be 8 beats long. I knew I wanted a slight delay across 8 zones. So again, that's a quarter note or a 16th note delay of 0.25 here times 8 zones. So I knew I had to add 2 extra beats to whatever motion I was going to put on the zone delay. And so I put this 10 beats, which is 8 beats of intended duration plus 2 for the zone delay. So that's why it's 10 as we go across there. Something you generally have to start with is understanding which projectors is this event going out to, and the first place to look for is just the projection zones. And something you can see here, which is kind of a hint that there must be more going on, is that there's only 4 zones. These are 4 also 2 mirrors, where like low 4 is the outermost 2. It's the outermost mirrored pair. It's generally mirrored, but right now it's not mirrored, and we're definitely delaying across 8 zones in order, not just the outermost ones first. So there's a clue that something else is happening here. And that is happening in the event properties, where you can override the projection zones. So because I wanted it to go from right to left, I started and I had to redefine prevent rerouting. So override what the track says for this particular one, with all 8 as single projector zones starting from right to left. So that's where this order matters, and that's why the zone delay is going to flow from the right ones first. Now there's other tricks that like Brad Kellogg and others like Frank helped me with. I had found some ways to do it, but there's better ways to do it. I'm probably forgetting some people to credit here, but if you want the zones to be off, you need to start with a brightness effect. But on this particular one, I didn't want that, so I'm letting them all be on at the start, and then that motion comes through in line and affects all of them. So I hope that was useful, and all I ask is the next time you learn something interesting and somebody else asks you how you did it, go ahead and pay it forward and don't gatekeep.